talk about fears. Let's talk about love. Yeah, I got fears, but I ain't got no love. Yes, I got fears. Fear of plane crash. Fear of car crash. Oh, fear of sex. Fear of alcohol.
So today is Wednesday, which means it is Deep Dive Wednesday. So this week, of course, you know we're doing the case of Dawn Marie Miller, missing person. And this is the first case, official cold case that I ever worked. So you've already watched Monday's Solved or Unsolved, and I left that up to you. By the end of this video, we'll come to a determination, or at least you will, hopefully, and whether it's solved or unsolved, and I'll give you my opinion on what I think. Tuesday's clue, Ken's key clue. You've seen that it obviously revolved around something I found in the police report that said, do you remember the spot? That was one suspect to another suspect. I'll get into why that was important to me. So, today, it's morning. I just want to sit back with you guys, drink a cup of coffee, talk about the case, try not to get too angry, try not to get too sad, and just talk about this case. So, here we go. So, Dawn Marie Miller, she goes missing October 24th, 1992. That date, the official date, was given by me. Nobody knows the date that she went missing. Okay? When I got the missing persons report, like I said, 2.5 pages. That's no exaggeration. There was no date on it. It said 3rd week of October, 1992. Through my investigation, I was able to pinpoint October 24th as the date, and I'll tell you how I came about doing that. So, like I said, I got the report. I was dismayed of, first of all, that we even had a missing person case. You know, if it wasn't for me searching online for missing persons, Williamsport, I don't think this case would ever, nobody knew about it. Even my captains who I approached to work the case didn't even know that we had a missing persons. So, you know, they allowed me to do it if I did it on my own time. I was a dope cop. In one of the pictures on the trailer, I think you'll see where I am out in the middle of a field searching. I have long hair and a ponytail. I was told I was a dope cop and that, you know, I couldn't work this case. I had drug work to do. And then when I said I would do it on my own time, then they agreed. So that starts me on the case. And this was probably in 2008, I want to say. Maybe 7. I got the report. I was excited. First thing you want to do is, in any cold case, read the report 100 times until you know it like the back of your hand. In this case, it was fairly easy to do. It took me about 2.5 hours. So, I did it. I honestly felt that there was more there, as in, there's got to be more police reports. This can't be it. Now, the Williamsport Bureau of Police had gone through a couple different report management systems from 1992 to 2008. Some of the reportings get lost. Now, you say, how does that happen? I don't have an answer for that, especially when it's not a high-profile case and it just kind of slips through the cracks. Whatever happened, happened. And I'm not here to point fingers. I'm just telling you the facts. In that 2-page report, at least, I was able to determine that there were 2 suspects right off the bat. I mean, the last person that Dawn was seen with was Greg, Emil, and his nephew Joe. Now, precious time was lost because Dawn lived in Williamsport. She went missing as far as anybody knew from Bellefonte. So that created some jurisdictional issues. When Dawn's mother, Sandy, went to Williamsport to report her daughter missing, her daughter was a grown-up, 23 years old. She can do what she wants. Slight speech impediment, maybe a little slow, but no, not really. I mean, nothing that would... It didn't prohibit her from getting work or anything like that. But she certainly wasn't a recognized name, a recognized figure, and nobody really took it serious. Williamsport police told Sandy Northern, Dawn's mother, go to Bellefonte and report it. She goes to Bellefonte. Bellefonte says, where's your daughter from? Williamsport. Well, you need to go to Williamsport. Back and forth. Okay? Finally, she's like, nobody will take the report. What do I do? She was smart enough to go to the newspaper. You got to understand. You got to understand Dawn's mother. Okay? For her alone even to take that step says a lot about her. She is not a boisterous. She is not outgoing. She's very timid. She's very reserved. And she took the step because she knew something was wrong. So she reported her daughter missing, not to Williamsport police, not to the Bellefonte police, but the Williamsport newspaper. They ran a story. Now all of a sudden, Williamsport says, oh, we need to take this report. So they're already behind the 8 ball by weeks. Okay? They assign it to an agent. In Williamsport, they're called agents, not detectives. They assign it to an agent. I subsequently spoke to that agent after he was retired. He told me, I remember the case. There was more to that police report. I know I did reports on it. I don't know what happened to it. But I will say I did interview the 2 suspects. So I was like, okay, well, what did they say back then? Because there's nothing indicated here, really, other than to say that they dropped Dawn off in Williamsport and she got a scratch on her face. Or he got a scratch on his face when he got a flat tire. And he's like, I actually remember driving them around in my vehicle and having them take me to exactly where they dropped her off at. I said, okay, well, do you remember that? Where it was? He said, yeah, they took me to a Unimart that was there. Said they dropped her off there. I said, okay. That's funny because when I go back to the original police report, it says we dropped her off at our house. Yet the detective over here, the agent, is telling me, no, I drove them, and they took me to a Unimart. Okay, there we go. Discrepancies. Number 1. All right, now we're going somewhere. So, I wanted to find more reports. Okay, and I'll get into how I did that. But I wanted to know more about Dawn. What type of person was she? Again, victimology. I found she was much like her mom, but she was a lot more feisty. Okay? She was reserved and timid when had to be, but she was feisty when she had to be as well. She was going through a bit of a rebellious stage, almost like a teenage angst in a way. And she was rebelling against what she had in her mom and her siblings. And she was kind of like starting this new dawn where she was going out. She's got a boyfriend. He's from Bellefonte. Okay. She wasn't one to have a lot of boyfriends. Okay. It's important. You're going to say, well, why do you say that? That is important to this story. Dawn didn't have a vehicle. Dawn did not come from money. But Dawn was very motherly. She took care of her siblings a lot, helped her mom out a lot. She was the oldest daughter. She would not hesitate to strike back, to yell when need be. So she's been seeing Greg for a couple of weeks, let's say 4 weeks, maybe a month. Back and forth, Williamsport, Bellefonte. Sometimes she'll go up there and stay in what was called the Academy Apartments. Academy Apartments, some other people lived there that we're going to get into. A gentleman named Mike Williams. Joe, the nephew, lived there as well with his girlfriend at the time, Bonnie, and that's where Greg would hang out. They would party, they would drink, they would do drugs. That was the gist of the Academy Apartments. So once I learned about Dawn, I want to learn about the suspects. Now, were they suspects right off the bat? Yes. Right off the bat with me. And not just because they were the last seen. It's because I started looking into their background. Okay? What type of people are these guys? Greg was in the Army. More of a loner type person. Somebody who may or may not have a little bit of cognitive disability as well, as in just didn't seem to fit in. Very close to his family. Joe, on the other hand, was violent. I didn't see that much in Greg's background when I started digging. Joe's police reports constantly. Domestic disturbances. Wrapped a cord around his girlfriend's throat. Hit a guy with a hammer during a fight. Many fights. A lot of drug use. A lot of drinking. So you look at the dichotomy of two people that were last seen with Dawn. Now, although Greg was older and Joe was the nephew, Joe kind of ran the show. Okay? From outward appearances. He was the alpha dog. However, according to Joe later, he was afraid of his Uncle Greg. So when somebody like that says that they're afraid because they don't know what their uncle would do, there's only two outcomes to that. There's only two reasons they're saying that. One, because they believe it. Or two, because you're making that up to put more of the emphasis on the uncle than yourself. So it's my job as an investigator to figure out which one it is. So, the official story. When Greg and Joe were interviewed back in 1992, very briefly by the Williamsport police agents, hey, she was up here with us. She was getting on the nerves of everybody in the Academy Apartments. So me being Greg and my nephew Joe, put her in a car and we took her back home to Williamsport. Some say, or at least on one occasion, to her house in Williamsport, other occasions to a Unimart in Williamsport, but nonetheless, from Bellefonte, which is 40 miles away, to Williamsport. On the way back home, their vehicle, which I believe was a 1982 Datsun, brown in color, got a flat tire. Greg, whose car it was, got out to change the tire. When he did so, the spare tire rolled down an embankment. While chasing that tire, he got a scratch on his face from a jagger bush. Possible story, right? Probable? I don't know, but if I was that police agent and he told me that story, what's the first thing he should have done? I don't know. Did you guess it? I know what I would have done. Show me your car. I want to see the spare tire. I want to see if there's a spare tire on there. Okay? That wasn't done. So that's the story. I get the case, 2008, read the reports. I go through victimology. I go through suspectology. I'm honing in on that scratch. I'm not believing the story. But you got to keep digging, okay? That's not enough for anything. Here we're, 92 to 2008, 15 years later or whatever it is. They've gotten away with it this long if it was them. I need more reports. I need police reports. There's got to be more than this. It's got to be. Well, let's go to Bellefonte, okay? Dawn's mom tried to report her missing there. That's where these suspects live. Let's go up there and pay a visit. So I paid a visit to my buddy Matt Rickard, who was a detective up there at the time. He pulls up a report, a search query by the name Don Miller, just to see, we're sitting there trying different names. Try Joe, try Greg, try Don Miller, blah, blah, blah. Don Miller, hey, we got a police report from, I don't know what it was. It looked like, let's say 2003. Ooh, 2003. She went missing in 92. It's 2008. What could this be about? Well, it's a gentleman named Mike Williams who says that he is confident that his friend, Don Miller, was murdered by Joe and Greg. And he was at the Academy Apartments that night when she went missing. And they took him hiking in the woods not long after Dawn went missing. And I'm sitting there reading this report, and it says, I got very concerned when Greg looked at Joe while we're walking through this wooded area hiking and said, do you remember the spot? And at this time, Joe got sick and vomited. Now, I had said earlier in Ken's Key Clue that this was significant to me. It was because I knew what that meant. Something happened, okay? But it gives you another lead, right? And I also said that the rookie detective in me honed in on the vomiting. Well, I honed in on that at the time because I thought, well, Joe is getting sick over thinking of killing Dawn. When in actuality, it was because he was high on, he was huffing gas and other things. And he was drinking and he threw up because of that. Not because he had any remorse. Do you remember the spot? Okay, so now that's what I got. Well, I got a lead there. The lead is Mike Williams. Okay, I don't have police reports. I don't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out. But I'm finding little breadcrumbs along the way. And as a detective, you'll take that. What you don't want is to be stonewalled and not have anywhere to go. Okay, I found this report. All right. Now I got somebody. So I go and visit Mike Williams. He's living in an apartment building. I have long hair. I have earrings in. Probably look pretty much like I do now, but with longer hair and probably a little rougher. I remember I was a dope cop. As soon as I get to his door, I smell weed coming out of it. I knock on the door, open it up. I'm hit with a pungent smell of marijuana. He opens the door, looks at me like, who am I? I hold out my hand. I said, I'm Officer Ken Maines with the Williamsport Police, and I'd like to talk to you about Don Miller. His face was that of confusion, as you can imagine. Am I there as a dope cop? Am I there to help his friend? What's happening? I told him right off the bat, I don't care about this stuff. I'm not here about that. I don't care what I smell. I want to talk to you about this. Don Miller. That's all I care about. Look me in the eyes. Understand that. Yes. Let's talk. That's how I handled that. That's how he handled that. He told me the exact same story that was in that police report. He couldn't believe that somebody was there all these years later, finally, asking about his friend Don. He filled me in a little bit more. Hey, they were talking about getting rid of her. In fact, there was rumor that Dawn was pregnant. Ooh, okay. Now this ups the ante a little bit to me. Tell me more about this. Well, I heard him say stuff. I was there that night. I was at the Academy Apartments. I heard them say she's gone like history. I heard Joe say we're going to roll her up in a rug. Didn't take it too serious, but I remember it. Nobody ever came to interview you about this. Nope. I had to go to the police all those years later to tell them what I knew. Nobody would listen, he said. See, I got to take my deep breath because I'm getting angry. And I got to drink this coffee quicker because it's getting cold. So bear with me. I don't pause my videos. Remember? I don't edit. This is live. I said, Mike, do you remember the spot where this happened? He said, yeah. I said, okay. I asked him at that time to take me to the spot. Okay. He gets in with me. Marijuana smell all over him. In right next to me in the vehicle. I don't care. I'm a dope cop. I don't care about it. Take me to the spot. We drive. We go to a little road. I want to say it might be Route 26. It's a back road between Jacksonville and Howard, Pennsylvania. There's a little bridge there, and there's a pull off, and then there's a reservoir there, right alongside the road. The reservoir is maybe 75 yards off of the road. We pull in there. He says, "Go here." We start walking a little bit. He's like, "This is the area. I'm not 100% sure this is the exact spot, but this is it." Okay, I have another lead, all right? Something happened here. I don't know what, but I will find out. Thank you, Mike. Let me take you back home. So I take him home. I'm constantly thinking about this case now, 24/7. But I don't want to jump right in and make mistakes, even though mistakes are going to be made. It's my first cold case, okay? Even though at the time I felt I was a very good detective, I still know that there's things that I, can mess up. I didn't want to interview the suspects right away. I wanted to do more homework, come up with more things, more evidence, so that way when I do interview them, okay, I got everything in line and I'm ready to go. Although, much like I am today, I was very confident. Confident in my abilities. Confident as myself as a human being. But you can't have an ego. You can't think that you can do it on your own all the time. I learned later it's very hard to ask for help on one of your cases because nobody will have that passion or that desire like you have. And when you ask for help and those people agree to help you, there's people out there that will help you. But when they don't have your fire and your determination and your ability to stay up 24 hours a day to do what you have to do to solve the case, when you see that that's lacking, you get jaded. And then you're like, I don't need help. It's very tricky. But I pushed my ego aside because I needed help. I realized I don't know everything. Okay? If you are a know-it-all, you're going to run into trouble. You have to be able to look in the mirror and say, hey, slow down. Let's talk. Let's talk to somebody. And that's what I did. I reached out to the Pennsylvania State Police's cold case unit out of Montoursville. Talked to a guy, I can't remember his name, might have been Bramley. He was supposed to be their cold case liaison or whatever it is. He had no interest, zero interest in this case or helping me. Nothing. Second call was to Hollidaysburg State Police and their cold case liaison. This guy did help me. This guy had his shit together. And this guy was phenomenal. His name was Dave Aiello. He was a trooper. He came down the next day. Flashed his badge because he knocked on I had my own office in the narcotics unit. He knocked on the door, showed me his badge, looked at me with my long hair. I was like, am I in the right place? I said, come on in. We sat down, went over the case. He agreed with me right off the bat. Hey, these two individuals, they need looked at. Is this all the reports are? I said, yeah. He's like, you got to be kidding me. Nope, this is it. His suggestion was to reach out to the old agents that worked on the case. And I said, well, I did that already with one. He says, well, let's go back to him. And we went back to him, got the name of another one. His name, I believe, was Glenn Bunce. Unfortunately, Mr. Bunce had passed away. So it was another dead end. Yet, I said to Dave, what are you going to do when you retire? What are you going to do with all your cases? He's like, I don't know. I'm probably not going to look at them. I said, but you're going to have them, right? He said, yeah, probably. I said, let's go to his wife. Let's find out if she has any of his stuff. Maybe the reports are there. Ended up going to Bunce's mother's house where everything was kept. We were in an attic. It had to be 135 degrees for about 4 hours, looking through all of his police stuff. Kind of eerie because he was no longer with us, but he kept a lot of his stuff. A lot of it. A lot of cases. Unfortunately, did not find one stitch of note relating to Don Miller. So finally, it got to the time where I felt, all right, we need to interview these guys. So the plan that we came up with was Greg was on Megan's Law. For you that don't know what Megan's Law is, when you're a sex offender, you have to check in every so often. Every time you move, you get a new vehicle. All those things have to be updated, and it's kept on a website, Megan's Law website. You can check and see who is a sexual offender around your area. Greg had molested his niece at some point in time and was charged with Megan's Law. And this was after this incident with Dawn. I wanted Greg and Joe to know that each other were in the police station being interviewed. Okay, this was very important to me. I didn't want to do them separately. You do want to do them separately, as in not together, but at the same time, in different rooms, and I wanted them each to know that they were there talking to the Williamsport police about Don Miller. Okay? So what I did was I had the state police call in Greg to say that he was there to update his Megan's Law registration. At the same time, we had Joe show up to talk about Dawn. They get there at the same time, each through the same hallway, coming in different directions. So now Greg sees Joe, Joe sees Greg. They know what they had done in the past. I wanted them to think in their mind, oh shit. That's what I wanted. Did it achieve its desired effect? I'd like to say so. So I wanted to interview Greg, because Greg was Dawn's boyfriend. I had written out questions that I wanted. I had memorized them. I was very specific in the interview room as how the interview table was set up and the chairs that were used. So in there they had a table that was up against the wall, and there was 2 chairs, much like the one I'm on, that rolls. So get rid of that. Keep the table the way it is, but I want one chair that has no legs or no wheels on it, and the other one wheels. When you bring Greg in, I want him to sit on the corner of the table, at the head of the table, with the chair that cannot move. I want the chair that has wheels on it, and I want to be right at the corner of that table. Now you ask why? What's specific about that? It was very important to let Greg know who was in charge right off the bat. Okay? He's going to realize really quick why he's there. And he hasn't talked about this in a number of years. I wanted to be able to move freely back and forth towards him or away from him. And I did not want him to have the ability to scooch away. So during questioning, when he'd give me a bullshit answer, I would slide up close to him and talk to him, more personal. He'd say something that I believed, I'd go back a little bit. So in this case, I asked him when he came in, I'm Officer Ken Maines with the Williamsport Bureau of Police. I'm here to talk to you about a case from a long time ago that you may have information about. He says, I thought I was here to update my registry. I said, well, no, I'm here now and we're going to talk about this. First thing I did was laid out a photo of Dawn. There's only 2 photos I've ever seen of Dawn. Maybe 3. So there's not a lot to choose from. So this one had been circulated. It's the one that was in the newspaper. And I laid it right down in front of him. I said, who's this? He picked it up, put it down, and he said, that looks like Dawn Miller. Right there was another key to me. He knew damn well it was Dawn Miller. But he says it looks like Dawn Miller. He's trying to distance himself already. I asked him, tell me what happened. Just like it was rehearsed. He went right back there. We dropped her off at the house. On the way back, got a flat tire, rolled down her embankment, got a scratch. I told him right up front, that's bullshit. You know how many flat tires I've gotten? You know how many times one of my tires rolled down over a bank? 0. I'm not buying it. It was very important to let him get his side of the story out and locked in on tape. Okay? You lock a suspect in on a story. So you let them talk. Go ahead. Tell me what you tell me. Tell me all your bullshit. At least I have you locked in on it. So once he told me all of his story, then I could hit him with these things. What I knew. What I believed to be facts. Discrepancies. And I did that. I told him, I don't believe you. You had something to do with Dawn's disappearance. I'm confident in that. These are the reasons why I believe it. And granted, at the time, there wasn't a lot of reasons. It was very circumstantial. Yet, I felt very strongly about it. I could sense when he was talking about it, not only was he nervous, which he should be, but there seemed to be a glimpse, a tiny bit of remorse. Now, how could I tell that? His body language, his demeanor. You know, he's talking, I'm watching him. He's telling bullshit, but I could see tiny bit of something. And I wanted to go after that. So what I said to him was, you know, how do you feel that Dawn's family and her mother don't even have a tombstone, don't even have a burial plot to go and mourn their daughter's death? And he looked at me and said, you don't think I feel guilty about this? Gotcha. Why would somebody feel guilty about something if they had nothing to do with it? See how I'm building now? You go from the police reports to Mike Williams, take me to the spot, to the suspects. Now we're getting somewhere. I told him the exact same thing. There's no reason for you to feel guilty if you didn't do something. What happened? You need to tell me. He said this interview's over. And he got up. I put my hand on his chest and sat him back down in the chair. And I said, this interview's over when I say it's over. Not when you say. Deep breath. Realize, Kenny, don't stay professional. You cannot get emotional over this. Okay? I know that's wrong. I can't do that. He got up. I told him I'd like to interview him. I'd like for him to take a polygraph test. He said he would think about it, but he was leaving. And he left. Meanwhile, in the other room, the trooper is questioning Joe. Joe's a little bit more blabbermouth about things. Basically saying, hey, I was passed out in the back seat the whole time. Dropped her off, as far as I know. We got a flat tire on the way back. I was so drunk. I don't know anything other than that. But if something did happen, it would have been Greg. Joe ends up leaving without giving up anything else. Although I left him with the same opportunity that I did Greg. You want to clear yourselves, you take this polygraph. Yeah, well, I'll call you. Well, that day Greg called. Well, he hired an attorney, and his attorney called and said, yeah, my client will not be taking a polygraph. Okay. Joe, however, did agree. So, me and the polygrapher, we go to, I want to say it was State College Police Department. For some reason, we used there, maybe because they had a two-way mirror. I'm not sure. But it wasn't Bellefonte, and it wasn't the state police. Regardless, we went, we did the polygraph. Joe gave, there's certain questions that you will ask a guilty party, or somebody that you don't know is guilty or not, but you'll ask them, and depending upon their answer, you'll know whether they're guilty or not. Joe, it was the model for textbook answers for a guilty person. Such as, what do you think should happen to a person who committed the act of murder on Dawn Miller, if she is murdered? Should they get a second chance, depending on the circumstances, or death penalty? Well, they should get a second chance, depending on the circumstance. What happens to the second person that was involved in this, but wasn't the main perpetrator? Well, they should get maybe a little bit of jail time, but nothing. He's giving answers, minimizing everything. And he failed the polygraph, of course, which was, I could care less. But it's the pre-test and post-test polygraph questions where you get your answers at. And that's where I got the answers. After the polygrapher was done, couldn't get him to confess. This agent had 30 years of experience. Couldn't get him to crack. Although he did get him to give some really good answers for me to follow up on. I went in with my long hair and a ponytail, shook Joe's hand, and said, this will never be over. Not while I'm on the case. You understand that, right? Yes, sir, I do. Is there anything else you want to tell me? No. All I can say is if anything happened to her, we dropped her off, but if anything did happen to her, it had to be Greg. All right. Well, just know I'm not slowing down. I won't stop until I figure out what happened. So Joe leaves. I go back. I believe I got a phone call from Bellefonte Police Department who said they had found there was a flood at some point in their records division. And a lot of their records were destroyed. However, some of them were in storage. and there was a possibility that there could be some reports out there about this case. So, of course, I went out. And lo and behold, I did find another one-page report. This one had to deal with Greg. Now, remember when I said nobody knew the date that Dawn disappeared, just the third week in October 1992, and I was able to determine October 24th? This one-page report, I'm reading it. It was classified assist suicide, which essentially means either somebody attempted or committed suicide and the agency was assisting medical personnel there. This was a suicide attempt by Greg Emmel in 1993. It was a one-page report, detailed an exact location in the woods that Greg Emmel tried to commit suicide. Okay. No big deal, right? Wait a second. October 1993, third week of October. Let's go to the date. October 24th. There's no coincidence, folks. That was a key clue to me. That's how I come up with the date. On the 1-year anniversary of her death, he went to commit suicide in the woods. Now, you're probably thinking the same thing I am. If he went on the 1-year anniversary of her death in the woods somewhere between Jacksonville and Howard, more than likely it was the location where she was killed or buried. Pretty good assumption, right? Guess where that report led me? Right back to where Mike Williams heard Greg say to Joe, "Do you remember the spot?" Now I have 2 incidents of something of significant value to Greg that happened in that location. I knew then something happened. Either she was killed in that location or she's buried in that location, or both. That's how leads develop. That's how you solve cases. You take little things and you build them, and it'll lead you to where you need to go to solve a case. So I'm excited, right? Something happened there. I got to figure out what. So let's take the next step. Cadaver dogs. Let's take cadaver dogs there and find out. So I contacted a K9 unit. Cadaver dogs went to the location, ran all around, hit on a spot a good 1,000 yards away from where they took me, to where Mike had taken me. He hit there. He sat. I was like, all right. Big overgrown field. It was actually a quarry. Dug at that location, hands and shovels, just digging. Nothing all around that. It wasn't in the exact location. It was, again, 1,000 yards probably from where, do you remember the spot? And from where Greg attempted suicide. But the cadaver dog alerted there. Me and this trooper, we mowed down the whole area. Searched. Every weekend I was up there searching. Every weekday I was walking the woods, walking the trail in that area, looking for bones, looking for abnormalities in the soil, clandestine graves, reading everything I could about them. You know, knowing that vegetation sometimes is greener where there had been a body buried, obviously from the decomposition of the body. The concave look, initially when the body's in there, it's going to be a little bit of a mound of dirt, but then as the body decomposes, it's going to decompress and have a concave look. Looking for all those things, and every time I found something like that, I would dig. Nothing. Some expert had told me that even though it had been 15 years, that a clandestine grave will give off some sort of heat signal that a helicopter could pick up on. I've been up in the helicopters, looking for marijuana, and you'll see in the middle of a cornfield more of a heat difference, and then we'd send the guys in on the ground to go and find that. It's much like that. However, I didn't notify the state police, even though we were using the state police helicopter. We had them up. State police, I had the trooper with me, so he got yelled at more than I did about not informing anybody that a helicopter was going to be flying low and hovering around that area for 2 hours because the neighbors kept calling 911 wondering what's going on. Needless to say, didn't find a damn thing. So as a detective, now what? Now what do you do? You've already interviewed the suspects. One of them quit talking, hired an attorney. The other one is lying through his teeth, but he still hasn't shut the door completely. Okay, so but you've searched the locations, 2 different locations. How about let's interview past people in their lives and find out if they heard anything. So we interviewed one of Greg's other roommates, Jeanette. Jeanette says, we were playing cards one night, and he said, hey, I can make you come up missing like I did another girl. Okay. Does that move the ball for you? Not really. But hey, check for when it goes to trial. There's a witness. Another guy says, you know what? Greg used to leave the apartment late at nights. Real late, 2 in the morning. And we'd wonder where he was going. So one time, we followed him. And we drove and got to Jacksonville. And there was a little road back there. And his vehicle was pulled off the road. This is like 3 in the morning. We pulled off. Started looking in the woods. He come out of the woods sweating like crazy, out of breath, wondering what we were doing there. Don't tell anybody that you found me here. Well, guess what location that was? You got it. Same location. What was he doing there? I know something's there. I know something happened there. Why is he going back to that location? So one day, I'm at that location during the day. I have my truck parked alongside the road. I'm walking. I'm looking for evidence. I don't care if it's 15 years later. I'm not just looking for bones. I'm looking for anything. I see a red truck slow down as it goes by me. And I look in there. Who is it? Greg. I thought, it looked like he saw a ghost. And boy, did it ever confirm to me, if I hadn't already known, that I was at the right spot. But where was Dawn? I jumped in my truck quick, and he only lived a mile down the road with his parents. I jumped in there, went down there because I said, you know what? I don't care that he hired an attorney. I can still talk to him. You know, I can still say, hey, what's up? I can still look at the fear on his face. I can still let him know, hey, this ain't going away. And that's what I did. Went down there, but guess what? He didn't go home. And I don't know where he went. So I'm sitting at home, 2 o'clock in the morning. My phone rings, my cell phone. Caller ID says Bellefonte, PA. I answer it. It's my buddy, Detective Matt Rickard. And what does he tell me? Hey, buddy, you're not going to believe this. I'm standing out here, and Greg Emmel is swinging from a tree. He tied a ratchet strap around his neck. He's dead. I said, I'll be right there. Now, where he killed himself was called Scotia Range. It's a big hunting preserve in State College. Now, apparently, just prior to him hanging himself, Greg was bawling his eyes out to his niece, his younger niece. I believe she was probably 17 at the time, maybe 16, about Don Miller and about this detective that wouldn't let it go. As he was explaining things to her, he asked for her to go for a ride with him. In the middle of this ride, he pulled off the road and took a stun gun and stunned his niece to try to rape her. She got out and ran all the way home. Greg went, bought a fifth of whiskey, went into the woods, and killed himself. There's two ways to look at that. Good or not so good, because I'm never going to get the truth. Greg drove truck for a living. My first thought was, he probably done this before. I want to search his truck. He had two trucks. One he drove himself to commit suicide in. Search that, nothing of significant value. I want his overhaul truck, his long road truck. In that was found a female wig, a dress, and a fake pair of breasts. Now, why would he have that? Well, I surmise that while on the road, he would oftentimes use the women's restroom dressed up as a woman. So he could spy on these other women. This is the type of individual that we're talking about. Did a search warrant on his house, where I was met with great hostility from his sister and I believe his father. His room was full of cat fur. It stunk. He had a computer. Searched his computer, found one thing relating to Don Miller. And it was a statement that it looked like he was typing up for his attorney. But nothing about where she was at and nothing proclaiming his guilt. Now, it has been alleged that he did leave a suicide note that his sister found and destroyed. Only one reason to destroy that. And that's if he confessed to doing something to Dawn or to, directions to where she is. So now, I have time to ponder. What's my next move? The more I thought about it, I said, now's our chance with Joe. Nobody left to take the blame. Remember before, Joe was putting it on Greg. If anything happened, it had to be Greg. So me and the trooper got together, and the trooper had made mention about getting Joe's DNA. You know, in case, we need it. Before he dies. And I said, yeah, I agree with that. And we said, what about, I think we can get a search warrant for his DNA. Do we have enough probable cause? We don't have a body. We don't have nothing, really. They were the last two to be seen with her. Greg had a scratch on his face. Now, I failed to mention that Joe was seen in Williamsport a couple days after Dawn went missing. And Dawn's brother was furious that nobody was doing anything, that he confronted Joe. You got to remember, Joe was known as a fighter. He would fight. He was a scrapper. Nobody wanted to confront him. But Dawn's brother confronted him. And he noticed a scratch on his arm, his left arm. Remember that. Scratch on the left arm and a scratch on his neck. I thought that I could get Joe to crack. And now was the time. Let's go get a search warrant for his DNA. So, we typed up what we had for probable cause, took it to the judge in Bellefonte, and the judge looked up after reading the affidavit of probable cause and said, what do you want his DNA for? You don't have nothing to compare it to. And Dave Aiello looked at the judge and said, not yet. And I looked at the judge and says, he doesn't know that. That judge gave a little smirk, went back down, signed it, gave us it. It was a big step getting that search warrant for Joe's DNA. Now we got leverage, okay? The uncle just killed himself. He's the only one left. He's going to take it. Let's go to the house. Let's go to the house. Let's get this. Drove to the house that night, knocked on the door. Joe answered. Joe, told you I'd be back, buddy. Here I am. Guess what? And this time, got a search warrant for your DNA. So, you're coming with us. Oh, he's smoking cigarettes. Well, I'll meet you. Where do I got to go? I said, we got to go to the hospital. They're going to pull blood from you. They're going to take hair. We're going to do all these things. I'll meet you up there. I said, no. I want to ensure that you get there safely. We will provide transportation for you. And it's already here, so come on out. Go outside. The trooper's driving. Joe gets in the back seat. Where do I sit? Well, one thing I knew for sure, I was not going to sit in front of Joe. I know that Dawn had sit in front of Joe the night she disappeared. And I'm not going to suffer the same fate. Although this outcome would have been a lot different, trust me. I still wasn't taking the chance. I sat in the back seat with Joe. We started backing out of the driveway. I looked over at him and I said, Joe, I can't believe that you're going to take the rap for this, for your dead uncle. That's all I said. There was 15 seconds of silence. And then I heard this. Okay, I'm going to level with you. Greg did kill her. You will not know the emotion that went through my body at that moment in time I can't even describe it. All the work, all the hours. It is something that I just cannot describe. It's like, I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. He went on to say what happened. He gave a whole confession. Dawn said she was pregnant to Greg. Greg was breaking up with her, didn't want anything to do with her. We said we were going to take her home. I was in the back seat. I looked up. Next thing I know, Greg is beating her across the head with something. He pulls off into the road, kills her, buries her. I did not participate, but I witnessed it. I'll take that. Okay? Stop the car, pull over, Mirandize him, give me the story again. Gives the exact same story. Now, why didn't I Mirandize him off the bat? He was speaking. To me, it was an excited utterance. He was not being detained. He was not under arrest. I made a statement to him. He responded to that statement, not a question. He didn't have handcuffs on. And he confessed. I didn't want... One thing I know, you don't stop somebody in the middle of them speaking. Say, oh, stop. Let me Mirandize you. Because then, maybe they would say, oh, I don't want to talk. Let it out. At least I'll know what happened. Then we'll Mirandize you. And then you can give the story. Well, that confession, according to the district attorney, was no good. Well, I'll get into that later. We record his statement. He tells me, he's minimizing his involvement. He had nothing to do with it. He was in the back seat asleep the whole time. And then when I said, are we going to find your DNA on her? Well, I sure hope not. No. What's his statement? And I said, well, you need to tell me. Well, okay, I helped drag her. And then I helped bury her. Each time he is a little bit more. Okay? Get him up to the hospital. Call the DA. The DA says there's not enough there. Let him go. I was furious. I knew he actively participated. He was the violent one. We know that from victimology and suspectology. There's no question. He had scratches on him. He was actively participated. Joe, can you take us to where this location is? I think so. Let's do it. We're driving down the road. I don't say a word. He says, turn here, turn here. Where does he take us? That's right. Back to that location of the reservoir. Takes us to an exact spot. This is it. This is where we buried her. I said, draw a circle in the leaves with your foot where she's at. He did that. There was no mound there. There was no concave dirt. But he was confident. Took him home. I went back to that location and I spent the night there. I wanted to make sure if she was there, nobody was moving her. The next day, I brought in Cadaver Dog, stood back, and watched him go to the exact spot that Joe had put a circle with his foot to say she was. And I was like, yes. Called in the anthropology team from Mercyhurst College who specialized in this. He walked up to it, looked around, looked at me, and said, "There's no body there." What? They dug a little bit, found nothing. I wasn't going to let it go. I brought a backhoe in, and I tore down that whole mountain. Looking. Nothing. Took a ground penetrating radar over another couple areas. Nothing. So again, you go from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows. The district attorney was new. I believe Mike Madera was the first district attorney while this was happening that I had conversations with. He's the one, I believe, who said there was not enough there to let him go. Stacey Parks Miller was the second district attorney. She was new to the office. I took the case to her. She said the confession's bad. I said, I don't believe that, but I'm not a lawyer. The trooper said, I've done many cases just like this, and that confession's good. Needless to say, me and that district attorney did not see eye to eye. She later ended up getting disbarred for a couple of infractions dealing with ethics. Not only was she believed the confession was no good, that it would get thrown out in court. When I inquired about charging Joe with gross abuse of corpse, because he acknowledged he helped bury her, and in his confession, he said they buried her about 18 inches and they used stones in their hands, and it was very rocky up there. I was told that the statute of limitations would have ran out on that charge. Now, I'm not an attorney. I done told you that. And I stay in my lane. However, I was fairly confident that when that charge is coupled with homicide, there is no statute of limitations. So why wouldn't she prosecute it? Again, it goes back to solved or unsolved. Throughout the years, I went back to that location, trying to determine what happened. Where did it go wrong? Where was Dawn? I don't know. I do know this. I drove about 2.5 hours one day to meet Dawn's mother in a restaurant to tell her what happened to her daughter. It was probably the third time I've met her, but the first time that I knew what happened. That her daughter didn't go missing. Didn't run away on her own accord. Her daughter met a very violent death at the hands of two individuals. One, which met his maker. The second, who still walks among us. A free man. And I sat down with that woman and I told her what happened to her daughter. She gave me a hug at the end of it. And I don't have a word to describe that feeling. It was very mixed emotions. I felt good that I could provide this very, very strong woman some answers to what happened to her daughter. Yet, feeling very unfulfilled, feeling as if I failed her because I could not locate her daughter. Although I had tried as hard as I ever could, but she was thankful. She was so very thankful that somebody tried. That's all she wanted. Someone to listen to her. Someone to try to not let Dawn be forgotten. And make no fucking mistake about it. She was forgotten. So when I say that Dawn changed my life, you have no idea. That hug I got from Dawn's mom changed my life. Because it made me know that at least if you try and you give 100% and you let these victims' families know and they can see that you tried and you can give them some sort of closure, some sort of resolution to their case, it's worth it. It's worth it. Never knew her. Never met her. And she affects me emotionally, even to this day. Regardless, some key points that I want to bring up that I wrote down in my trusty little notebook. The amount of bones that I found up in that area where I believe Dawn Miller was. The anthropologists got sick of me. I'd send them every little bone that I found. Nope, that's raccoon. Nope, that's possum. Nope, that's deer. Had one occasion where I thought for sure I found her. I took my sergeant at the time, Tim Miller, who ended up becoming the chief of police at Sunbury. And he had a quote in the paper that sums up my investigation. He said, Kenny was ruthless on this case. You're goddamn right I was. I was going to figure it out, no matter what it took. And we were up there, and we picked up a log, and we seen all these bones, and they were big bones, human-sized bones. And it wasn't just me seeing it. He saw it. There was no skull, but there was a clothes hanger that was wrapped around a vertebrae. This is it. He said, you found her. I almost started crying. I fell down over the bank, running to my phone to call the state police because it was their jurisdiction to where the body was found. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. First trooper gets there. They look at it. They're like high-fiving me. You did it, man. You didn't give up. I was like, I can't believe it. I got it. They start calling in everybody else. They start coming. And why? They're on their way. Found a jawbone. It was that long. It was a deer. Somebody had drug a dead deer there. And the bones got scattered. And the clothes hanger they used to drag it, whatever. And I was so crushed that I took that jawbone that I knew was not human. And I held it up to my jaw. And I looked at the trooper and I looked at Tim. I said, no, man, it could fit. Look, look. And I could see in their eyes, they didn't want to tell me no. They just shook their head. Oh. Again, the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. I used to check Jane Doe's all over, just in case, their body was found somewhere. Found a couple that I thought were her. We had Dawn's dental records. Matched them up. No. So, for people that want to question whether I did that or not, we certainly did. There was one that from Pennsylvania that looked just like her. The reconstruction of the face looked just like her. I sent her x-rays of her jaw or dental work, and they said no, it wasn't her. Very significant development to me was after Joe confessed to us. We recorded it, and I spent the night there. And that next day, while I was digging, I got a phone call on my cell phone from an attorney, Joe's attorney. Joe had went and gotten an attorney. And he said, I understand my client led you to a body. And at the time, I said, well, we're looking, but yeah. I look back at that in hindsight, and I say, because people will say, well, why was there no body there? Could Joe just have been lying? And I look back at that statement from the attorney, and I know Joe was telling the truth. Why else would he hire an attorney and tell the attorney that he led me to a body if he did not believe himself that a body was there? And that's why the cadaver dog hit there. That's why 3 different police reports led me back to that location. Because she was there. But she got moved. So what do I think happened on October 24th, 1992? Well, I think the evidence will tell you this. Dawn, being very naive, knowing her boyfriend of 4 months or 4 weeks was breaking up with her, she decided to tell a little white lie. She decided to tell him that she was pregnant. Now, do I believe she was pregnant? I don't. Is it possible? Sure, it's possible, but I don't think she was. I think she said that to him so he wouldn't break up with her. And it ultimately backfired so much that it ended up costing her life. Greg decided, and I know this from witness statements from Joe himself, that Greg said, I wasn't going to be a father to her child. We're going to get rid of her. They put her in the car. She didn't want to go. She did not want to go. They put her in the car under the ruse, hey, let's go back to Williamsport so you can get more clothes and come back here. She said, okay, why is Joe going with? She felt very uncomfortable. She had told Joe's girlfriend, Bonnie, who was at the Academy Apartments that night, she didn't trust Joe. Bonnie says, I found it very odd. Joe was so possessive of me, he wouldn't leave me alone for 2 minutes. But yet, he went with Greg to take Dawn back that night. I found it very odd. Joe climbs in the back seat. Dawn's in the front passenger. Greg's driving. They go to that spot halfway between Bellefonte and Williamsport. It is a place where they had gone before. Dawn had gone there with Greg, parking, making out, having sex, whatever it was. So they were familiar with that area. They pull in. What I believe happened is that Joe reached up with his left hand, his left arm, and put her in a chokehold and pulled her back. That's why he has scratches on his left arm and on the left side of his neck. Greg begins to beat her with an object. I don't know what that object was. There's blood in there. They kill her. They drag her out. She isn't dead yet. They finish her off with a blunt force object. They bury her using stones as shovels. And they go back to the Academy Apartments. When they get back to the Academy Apartments, Mike is still there. Joe's girlfriend is there. Mike observes blood on Joe's pants. And he says something to Joe. And Joe says, "Oh, that's just red paint from a job I had earlier today." Joe's girlfriend witnesses them go into the bedroom and are talking in a whispered tone. They come back out. Joe is in the bathroom and is washing up. The next day, Mike observes them take Dawn's backpack, which was left in the apartment, and throw it into the dumpster. He questions them. "Why are you throwing that away?" One of them says, "She's never coming back." Joe's a free man. Although he's been in and out of jail since then for other offenses, I still keep tabs on him. Had information that Dawn's remains are buried in a family house underneath some concrete. I gave that information to the district attorney at the time and the Pennsylvania State Police in that jurisdiction. They said there was nothing that they could do. I said, you can do a knock and talk. You go and knock on the goddamn door. And you'll ask to search. If they say no, at least you tried. They did not do this. The justice system failed Dawn Miller. It failed Dawn Miller's family. And it fails hundreds of thousands of people daily. Yet, I'm an optimistic person. And I will take the good from this. And I will take the gift that Dawn gave me to never give up on a victim. To never give up on a case. To work that case till the end. No matter what it takes. No matter what ridicule you'll get from other law enforcement, from other people. I don't care. I don't care what you think about me. Okay? I'm doing a job and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. Bar none, period, end of story. I could probably talk for another 2 hours about this case. There's some things that I probably left out about this case. how nobody cares about Don Miller, especially in law enforcement. You go to the Williamsport Police today, you will not, and I repeat, you will not find a missing persons flyer hanging up there. There are a few individuals, Mike Williams, Bonnie, Jeff, Sandy, few individuals, family members, Carol, the aunt, that do care and will do the right thing. But there's other people I feel probably know more than what they've told. And they don't care. It doesn't affect them, so they don't care. I get very angry when people don't do the right thing. I get very angry when there's people that are suffering and nobody helps them. That's all I got to say about this case. I'm not going to drag it on. Don Miller, my first official cold case. I wrote a book about it called Forgotten. And I wrote it as a screenplay. So it reads as a screenplay. It tells a story. And I wrote that so when I'm dead and gone, she will live forever. Because I'm a firm believer that once the last person that knows you dies, you never existed. Dawn was forgotten up until I got that point. She will not be forgotten as time moves on. So, that's it for Deep Dive Wednesday, the Dawn Marie Miller case. Stay tuned Thursday, where we will do the live chat about the case. Friday, I'll answer your questions and comments with another video. I'll get your questions and comments from the Deep Dive comment section and the Ken's Key Clue and the Solved or Unsolved. Is this solved or unsolved? I think it's solved. Although I did not find her remains. We may not ever find her remains. I know who did it. 2 people, without a doubt, participated in her murder. I got a confession. Okay? The evidence points towards it. Maybe your definition of solved is different than mine. But my definition is knowing who did it, why it was done. I figured that out in my first cold case. So, hope you guys understand the trials and the tribulations, the ups, the downs, the emotional investment it takes in these types of cases. And I guess it'd be my hope that you will never forget Dawn Marie Miller. Because I know I never will. With that, Maine's out.